What happens when you pull a small group in your classroom? How does it go? Are you able to focus on the group, or are you more focused on what's happening around your classroom? Welcome back to Special Educators Resource Room podcast. This is Jennifer from Positively Learning. This is week 8 of our Special Educators Summer Series. All summer long, I've been popping up on YouTube on Wednesdays and here on Fridays with a new podcast episode. And we've been working through step by step how to build an independent work system. So not only do students know what to do and they're getting what they need, but you are also able to pull small groups, collect a data point, support a student appropriately one-on-one if needed. Last week, I laid out exactly how to perform the small group test. It was a 5-minute test. You definitely want to hit pause, go back to the last episode if you didn't catch it. Today, we're going to be moving on. We're going to be troubleshooting where independent work systems usually break. Before we go into the 5 most common problems, I do want to reframe what it means when we are in the troubleshooting phase. Troubleshooting is not what happens when the system fails, when it just breaks down. Troubleshooting is what happens when the system is almost working. There's actually a really big difference. All summer long, we've been working through building a system. A system that's never been built doesn't need troubleshooting. It needs building. You have done the building. Now we're just in the refinement stage, finding that one specific thing that still needs adjustment and adjusting it. It's a completely different position than where most teachers are when independent work isn't working. Most teachers are trying to figure out what to do next. What should I try out? You're not doing that. You're trying to figure out which part of that built system just needs a small fix. Those are not the same problem. The second one, the one that we have, it's a lot easier to solve. And if you're listening to this right now, not exactly sure if your system is built or not, please hit pause. Go through the last few episodes on YouTube at Positively Learning and here on this podcast. This is week 8. We have been building the system in these small steps, one action step per week so that it doesn't feel overwhelming. I highly recommend catching up before we move on to this episode. Now let's talk about those 5 breakdowns that we see consistently in independent work systems. This could happen across classroom types, grade levels, support needs. If you did the small group test last week and you had a breakdown, it's most likely going to be one of these 5 areas. All right, let's get started. Problem number 1, most common problem. Students don't get started. You've set up the independent work system. You walk away because you're going to go pull a small group, but you look back over your shoulder and your students are just sitting there. They're not working. They're waiting. This is a clear start problem. And we talked about this in week 6 of the series, which is podcast episode 185. The task might not be giving the student a strong enough signal to begin without you standing right there. The fix has 2 parts. First, looking at the task itself. Does it have a visual start cue? Are there student-friendly visual directions? Could you take the task and perform the first match? Maybe it's a Velcro match. Maybe it's a puzzle piece. Maybe it's clipping the first answer. Does the first move look obvious without having to verbally explain it? If not, let's add that. Second, going back to step 2 of the teaching sequence, we talked about that in week 4, which was episode 183, practicing with support and practice specifically the starting move. This is where the student sits down, opens or picks up the task, and begins. And you're right there. We can repeat this step until that start is automatic. That was solving problem number 1 when students just do not get started. Problem 2 is students have gotten started, but then they stop midway. So students start, they get partway through, and then they stall. They maybe raise a hand, they maybe come and try to find you, or they just stop engaging with the task. There's 2 possible sources. First, the task might be at the wrong difficulty level. Independent work tasks need to be in that zone of almost but not quite, familiar enough to start without the help, manageable enough to work through without stopping. If the task is above that zone, the student might stall at the hard part every time. We need to adjust the level or find a different task for the same skill. Second, the task might not have a strong enough clear work signal. The student doesn't know if they're doing it right, and then that uncertainty stops them. They don't have that resilience built up to keep going. We can solve this by adding some type of self-checking element. This could be puzzle pieces that only fit one way, or using those visual student directions as a model to compare against. So the task itself answers that, "Are you on the right track?" question. Problem number 3, students are rushing through. This one can look like success until you look at the work. Now, we do not really put a huge stress on checking every task. You absolutely want to check in, especially if you suspect that students are just like putting pieces together that make no sense. However, when I'm thinking about an independent work system, I'm thinking about it as a process. Can students work through a task from start to finish on their own? If yes, then that's when I would be looking at accuracy. Not every single task. We're not using these as exit tickets. But if I suspect students are just kind of slapping them together, then I'm going to be leaning in and checking accuracy. I also would randomly check accuracy like 1 out of every 3 or 4 tasks if I'm doing progress monitoring. If students are rushing through, the fix is the work system that we talked about in week 5, which was episode 184. Specifically, what comes after the last task. If done doesn't have a predictable, worthwhile next thing like a preferred activity, a choice, a schedule break, then the only interesting thing about finishing is the attention it could get. So we want to add a clear, valued next step. When done leads to something good, the incentive to rush might disappear. Students are working at the pace the task requires because there's no advantage to going faster. If you're not sure that would be enough to stop students from rushing, you could build in a quick accuracy check before students move to the next activity, and then make the next step something they can look forward to. When careful work, not just fast work, is what leads to that preferred activity, there hopefully will be much less reason to rush. Problem number 4, students are waiting on you for your approval. Maybe a student finishes a task or part of a task and looks up at you. Or they've completed the whole thing, but they just sit there, waiting for confirmation that it's right before they move on. This is a teaching sequence problem from week 4, which is episode 183. Specifically, the student learned during supported practice that approval comes from you, the adult, because you were right there. And every time they finished a piece, there was some kind of confirmation, even if you didn't mean to give it. Now the habit that they've developed is to look up after each step. So the fix is step 3 of the teaching sequence, practicing with less support, with you deliberately stepping back and not responding when the student looks up. Now you're not ignoring them, but you're just calmly staying nearby, but you're making it clear that the task is the source of confirmation, not you. Each time you kind of hang back a little bit, maybe you have shifted so that you are close by, but you're facing a different direction. You are shifting that authority from yourself to the system. It takes a lot of repetition. This is something that is going to probably feel very new. We want to give it a lot of time, but I think it would be worth it because we want students to be able to receive that confirmation from the task they're doing, not always relying on you. And the last problem number 5, is students who are constantly asking questions. Where does this go? Is this right? What piece comes next? Do I put it here? This is a task design problem. The student is asking questions. The task should be answering, not you. Look at what they're asking and build the answer in, if possible. If they're always asking where pieces go, we want student visual directions. If they're always asking if they're right, you may want to start off with tasks that are puzzles, something that has only one clear answer. If students are always asking what comes next in this sequence, we want to make the task sequence more visible. Maybe it's a checklist, numbered steps, left to right layout, a clear next indicator. If there's a task that always generates tons of student questions, that task was designed to be used with you nearby. So it's not like the task completely failed. It's just not right for an independent work system. So you might want to use that task in your small groups, maybe at the beginning, like a hook, or at the end, like an exit ticket. You then want to replace that task with one that is designed for independence. Those are the 5 main problems. And here's how I would approach fixing this small group test, because it's easy to get ambitious and you try to address everything at once. I would suggest picking one of those problems and apply one fix, and then apply that one fix to one student or one group of students. Not because the other problems don't matter or we're going to ignore the other students, but because troubleshooting is most effective when it is very focused and targeted. If you try to adjust all 3 things at once and the behavior changes, you're not going to know which fix worked. If we adjust one thing at a time and we see a change in the behavior, you're going to know exactly what to repeat. If you haven't done the small group test from last week, do that first, and then pick one of those issues, the one bottleneck that you named after last week's test. Find it in the 5 problems we just talked about it and apply the fix that I suggested. And watch what happens over the next few days. If it works, great. You've closed the gap. You can run the small group test again and see if it holds. If it didn't fully work, we can look closer at which specific part of that fix just didn't land. Usually it means the fix was right, but it just needed more repetition. Or the main part was something else that was happening and we can apply a different fix. The main thing is we want to do one problem, one fix, watch what happens, and then move on to the next. Now, I do want to finish up with something before next week's episode. I built out this system. We were working backwards because independent work systems often fail, most not because you're not putting in the effort, you're not trying, but because we tried it without a sequence. Maybe you started with the tasks but didn't have the plan. Maybe you set up the physical space, but we didn't have the system clear. And then we added tasks, but we didn't teach the routine. And then something broke down, but we didn't know what to do to fix it because we didn't know how we built it. That's not you. You have been working through this series and you have built something, and you built it in a sequence that made sense. And now when something breaks, we can follow that leak, whatever's happening, we can follow it back through the sequence, and then we know exactly where to look. That's what a system gives you. It's not perfect. It's not going to be the perfect system in September, but it is something that's going to get better, even when something breaks, because now you're going to know how to fix it. Next week, we're going to talk about launching this plan. So if you are not caught up, I highly recommend binge listening or go on YouTube and binge watch these episodes. They're pretty short. They take one action step, but the sequence that we laid it out is very important. I still think you could probably sit down and do them all in one afternoon. Next week, we're going to come back. We're going to launch this. It technically is the last week of the summer series, but we won't finish there. I need your questions so I can make sure you have everything you need. So be sure to reach out at Positively Learning. You can email me, message me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are. Come find me, because even though we're finishing up next week, that doesn't mean we're finished. I am here for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you next time in the Special Educators Resource Room. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm dying to ask, what'd you think? Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe buttons so that you never miss an episode. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at positivelylearningblog.com. See you next week for more special education solutions.